Countdown with Brett Pritchard, Randy Lee, and Luke Robinson. Auburn, Alabama, around the SEC and around the nation. This is the Saturday Sports Countdown. To be a part of the program, call 256-234-6221. Now, let's join Brett, Randy, and Luke for the Saturday Sports Countdown.
Good Saturday morning. Welcome into the Sports Blitz Saturday Sports Countdown. Randy Lee alongside Luke Robinson this morning. 256-234-6221 is our phone number. I'd love for you to come out and be a part of the program as we're live on location at JR Sports Bar and Grill as we are each and every Saturday. Bring your kids out in uniform. They'll eat off the kids' menu for $3.99. Can't ask for better corporate partners out there. And Luke, got a lot of different elements that you're able to pull us in up on. So make sure to find us on all the social media outlets out there. I want to thank Charter Channel 3, Lake Broadcasting 97.5 for being a part of this program for 10 years now, Luke. And it's a beautiful day outside, a little bit cold, but plenty to talk about. Out of football season, Super Bowl's done, still plenty on the horizon out there to talk about.
There certainly is. Obviously, we could still talk about recruiting if anybody wants to. I'm still hanging on to recruiting just barely with my fingernails. Nobody else really wants to talk about it, but I do. I like talking about recruiting year-round. College basketball, look, I could go on a rant for this entire show about Alabama basketball right now, and you could probably do the same thing about Auburn basketball right now.
Not in the way that you're going to go on Alabama, though.
Exactly, but it's amazing the turn of events over just the last few weeks, and I really want to spend a lot of time talking about that because it's intriguing. The basketball is interesting again, but not for the reasons I thought it would be. I really thought Alabama was going to struggle a lot this year. And then when Dazon Ingram went down, I thought Alabama had absolutely no shot to make any noise whatsoever. And lo and behold, here we are in a game the other night that ended essentially with a guy who's 93% from the free throw line, missing 2 free throws. What are the odds? Alabama had one of its patented late game collapses. They had a big lead. They were up 11. Arthur Edwards had a three-pointer with the lead at 11, about 6 minutes to go, and he missed it. He was wide open. He just missed it, and you could feel the momentum turn right there. Texas A&M makes a run. They actually get a lead. Things are looking good for A&M, and the guy just misses 2 free throws, 93% from the line. Just an unbelievable turn of events. Meanwhile, at Auburn, what has been going on with Bowers and Canty, the 2 best players on the team, I don't think that's even arguable. And the 2 guys who were probably the hardest to wrangle in. I mean, they're the hardest to figure out. They've got the most talent. And Canty, the other day, goes on social media after being suspended and essentially says, I'm declaring for the draft. Well, first of all, is he going to be drafted? I mean, I find
in the first 2 rounds.
They're only 2 rounds.
Zilch. No chance. And I may be wrong. I mean, this guy can score. He doesn't defend. He doesn't have the size in his favor. I don't see it. I like Kareem Canty. I would have continued to be a fan. And, look, this is not crying over spilt milk. He's moving on and decided to pull away from Auburn and he's going his own merry way. Fine. Good luck to you. Do I think he's an NBA player? No. Do I think he's as good as, say, a Tony Douglas that was at Auburn that went to Florida State? No, I think he's kind of like the same type player. He's a shorter version that can get buckets in a college game. I don't believe that it will parlay into an unbelievable pro career. Now, maybe I'm wrong. I hope for the kids' sake I am, Luke, but that's where I feel about it.
Look, it's just a very strange week of college basketball, and I guess for Auburn it's been a strange couple of weeks because I can tell you that as an Alabama fan, when Bruce Pearl got there, I thought some things would turn around rather quickly. And next year they may turn around because you've got some good players coming in. You got Wiley coming in, some other big recruits, and you got some younger guys that will be another year older. But
plus you get some players back. I mean, you got Purifoy that's not able to play this year. You got plenty of other guys that are injured or just extremely young. And your 2 best players, as you mentioned, they're headaches. And Bruce Pearl, when you come into a situation that Tony Barbie left Auburn with, Luke, you probably have to go out there and take a risk from time to time and go and get a Kareem Canty and go and get a Bowers that there's a pretty good guesstimate going in that you're going to have some issues. And it has been. And unfortunately, I think it's going to be a little bit longer than us Auburn fans and vice versa. I think Alabama has got to be thrilled with what they're seeing right now.
look, I went on a show, Bam's Radio, the other night, and I said, look, I was in a basketball Anthony Grant-induced coma. And, the other night they had this big thing where they gave away the foam three fingers for a three-pointer, et cetera. I said, Anthony Grant should have had a giveaway where he just gives you a pillow when you come in because you're going to sleep, and you might as well be comfortable. If you go to the game, if you're dumb enough to have gone to a game when Anthony Grant was the coach, you're going to sleep. And Avery Johnson is the absolute opposite. He's going to coach. You're going to watch him coach. He's going to enjoy your watching him coach, and he's going to give interviews. He's going to talk to the media. He's going to talk to the fans. He's going to have a rapport with the players that is undeniable. And he's going to get guys better. Riley Norris is so much better from when we saw him last year. You look at Jimmy Taylor is even better. And I feel bad for Jimmy Taylor in the sense that I feel like he and Dante Hall are kind of the same player. I mean, they've got some differences, obviously. They're kind of the same in the sense that they're both around 6'10", both pretty slender. And they both can jump. Dante Hall can jump higher than just about anybody, as you know. But the difference is Dante Hall doesn't have any Anthony Grant to get off of him. And Jimmy Taylor has to wash off all this Anthony Grant, this stuff, because he apparently wasn't teaching him very well. He wasn't developing. He seems like the same player. He's a little better now, but I think that's because Avery Johnson's been involved. And Dante Hall is so much better from the moment he took the court to now. And I talked to my friend Brian Passing, who's the color analyst for the Alabama Crimson Tide basketball. And he said the one thing Dante Hall has is timing. He knows he goes and gets a ball at the highest point that he can go get one. It goes and gets a rebound. We talk about receivers doing it. It's good for basketball players too. Go get the ball at its highest point. Don't give somebody else a chance to get it because Dante Hall can jump higher than everybody. And he's just got to go get it. And the problem is Jimmy Taylor didn't have that sense of timing that Dante Hall has.
And let me say, you and Brett and I called you after the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game last year. And in our peripheral on the left side, we were at Alabama State. They have an entrance way that the kids are coming. I'm guessing it's 12 to 13 feet high.
Yeah.
And Dante Hall. And we weren't watching him directly, but we just kind of saw that this guy, jumps on up. And, I mean, he palms this thing that's 2 or 3 feet above the rim. And it wasn't just us, Luke, but most were taken back in the gym that saw this. And I also, the most, and that's all well and good. But the reason that I really called you is I called to say, Luke, you're getting the best player in the state of Alabama, and it's not close. Dazon Ingram is the best player in the state. He was expected to be in person. He's the best player. And the reason that I think he's the best player is because of his length at 6'5", and because of his handles playing a point position that I felt Alabama was a need position. I think this is worth bringing up right now because Johnson doesn't have him. This Alabama team does not have what I consider to be one of their best opportunities to make it and be a pro at some point in time.
I think Dazon Ingram was sorely misjudged in rankings. And I'm a big stars guy. I'm a big rankings guy. I believe in them overall, but they make mistakes. And I think they made a mistake with Dazon Ingram where they had him at a 3-star. I mean, he's got a very high 4-star capability.
Yes.
And
because he plays a point.
He plays the point. He was the best player, I thought, on Alabama's team when he got hurt. He was really coming into his own. He's the guy we wanted taking big shots. I mean, Retno Basahan is the team leader, but that doesn't mean he's the best player. And I feel like Dazon Ingram was that guy, and Avery Johnson's been able to overcome it. And there have been other guys who were nicked up and hurt. Shannon Hale has had some problems. Obviously, Jimmy Taylor has had a few issues as well. So they've had to overcome a lot. And the league is better. The good news for Alabama, the league is better, but nobody's dominant. I mean, South Carolina is probably going to win this thing because of their schedule. And Kentucky is Kentucky, but it's not the same Kentucky we've been seeing. It's certainly not last year's Kentucky. And so Alabama was right there against LSU. The catch for Alabama is if they want to get into the tournament, and they have a shot, it blows my mind that they have a shot. They have a shot. In fact, in Jerry Palm's bracketology on CBS, he has them in one of the play-in games, which is still considered the tournament, playing UConn in the opening 4 games. They've got to win one of these games. They got games at Florida today, at LSU next Wednesday. Then they're going to go on the road to Kentucky. I believe it's next week. And then they're also going to finish up at Georgia. You got to win one of those, and you got to sweep at home. At home, you've got Auburn, who's a train wreck now, Arkansas, who's 500 at best. They're not very good, and Mississippi State, who's one of the bottom dwellers in the league. You got to sweep at home and win one of those 4 road games, which is a daunting task, but they can do it.
256-234-6221, and those that watch our program know that you're big on scheme and basketball. You probably know more about basketball than you do any other sport, Luke. And what, when you watch, because I know you and Brian Passing are big buddies, so I'm sure this has been discussed with the two of you, what part of this Alabama team, coaching-wise, that's X's and O's in game, do you see such a big difference with Avery Johnson this year?
You know, I think that the coaching X's and O's aspect of it gets a little overplayed in this scenario. I think Anthony Grant's probably a good coach if it were just X's and O's. The problem is he exuded no fire whatsoever. You never wanted to go to battle for him. You look at Avery Johnson, and first of all, you probably know his story. You know his backstory. He was a walk-on, played for a small school in Louisiana. He's the all-time assist leader in NCAA history or something like that. And he's just got all these – he's overcome a lot. He's small. He talks funny. But he's incredibly likable. There's just so many things to like about him. And in the end, he's smaller than you. He's probably not as fast as a lot of players. But he'll beat you. He'll just find a way to beat you. He's one of those winner guys. And so people want to overachieve for him. And he's got a magnetic personality. It was the opposite with Grant. You went around him. And have you ever been to a party and you go up to a guy and he starts talking, you're like, you know what, I just remembered I have to go to the bathroom, or I have to go wash my car, or I've got to do something else other than talk to you. That's how Anthony Grant was.
We got plenty more to talk about today. Love to hear from you. Gymnastic streak broken by Auburn at 117. We'll talk some local sports as we've got plenty of Benjamin Russell teams that are on the road playing, recruiting. Basketball, Auburn and Alabama there. And we'll talk Super Bowl and Cam Newton. We'll take your phone calls. 256-234-6221. More of the Sports Blitz Saturday Sports Countdown right after this.
Clear.
888-585-0080 or visit them online, thesureshot.us. The Sure Shot, Lake Martin Sportsman's headquarters.
This segment of Sports Blitz is brought to you by Satterfield on Highway 280 in Alex City. Satterfield is the Lake Martin area's Big Green Egg and Accessories headquarters.
5 seconds, y'all are live.
Welcome back into the Sports Blitz Saturday Sports Countdown. I'm Randy Lee alongside Luke Robinson, 256-234-6221. We're live on location at JR Sports Bar and Grill, as we are each and every Saturday in beautiful downtown Alexander City, Strand Park. If you haven't been out, we'd love for you to. There's plenty going on up and down Alabama Street here, so come on out and be a part of the program. I mentioned it as we were heading into break, but the Auburn gymnastics team finally gets over the hump. Is this the first victory all time? I've seen it go back to 79, but I think it's the first of all time, maybe just because the program started then. I don't know enough about the history.
There's a friend of mine that said the streak started when he was maybe a sophomore at Alabama. I guess that's when the program started. I don't know enough about the history of it. And he's now 57, and it's over. I mean, look, I don't have any problem with Auburn winning that. I mean, that doesn't bother me at all. I feel like a 117-game lead, we got a pretty good lead. You aren't catching us, at least in my lifetime. I'm happy with that.
Here, I'll say this about Alabama's women's sports. They have brought Auburn's women's sports and the SEC's women's sports up to a level where Auburn's super competitive. If you watch their softball program right now, if I told you Auburn and Alabama both were going to make the softball World Series again, you wouldn't be surprised. If you look here at the gymnastics, I think Alabama's ranked 4th, Auburn 8th. Alabama's won how many national championships in gymnastics? 5 or 6, 7, 8?
Yeah, somewhere.
A whole bunch of them, and they've been in a lot more, and softball as well. So, Luke, that's really a strength of the Auburn athletic program right now is the women's program, and if anything, I think Alabama has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, I think that you can feed off one another. I mean, it's like you talk about in business, competition can be good. Yes. It pushes you to be better, and that's how Alabama and Auburn tend to be. And I think that eventually Auburn just got tired of saying, hey, why is Alabama – they're getting a lot of love from gymnastics. The thing is, now with so many platforms for all these different sports, women's sports are going to find their niche. I mean, you're going to be on ESPNU, ESPN2, ESPN something. And so ESPN wants to put new content instead of old bowling matches on there. And they're going to put softball games. They're going to put gymnastics. They're going to put swimming. They're going to put some of the ancillary sports. And if you're going to play them, just be good in them. And I think Auburn figured that out in softball. They figured that out in gymnastics. And it was just also going to happen. Sarah Patterson wasn't going to be at Alabama forever.
Yeah.
So, and she ended up stepping down. And the new coach is there. And it's okay. There'll be some people that are probably upset by it, but look, somebody was going to lose to Auburn eventually. You weren't going to go 1,000-0.
Nick Saban won't be there forever either.
No, Nick Saban won't be there forever, and so that's
Auburn fans are ready for him to go ahead and hang it up.
But he isn't human. He is a robot. So there is a chance, as long as his batteries stay charged long enough and he's connected to Wi-Fi, I feel like we're going to have a good shot at keeping it.
SEC money's got a lot to do with these women's sports too, buddy. When you're talking about the money that's being divvied out by the SEC network and conference title games and all these things that are going on, it can only help. And it's not just these two sports. It's almost all of them. SEC countries becoming tough to deal with.
And Justin Mosley, one of our producers, just texted and said the overall record is 117-10. So Auburn had a 9-game streak to start out.
I got you.
And Alabama got upset and said, we're going to rattle off 117 in a row. And as Jeremy Schaap tweeted out last night, and I thought this was great, he said, nobody beats Auburn 118 times in a row.
256-234-6221. Let's talk a little local sports here quickly on segment 2. And BRHS Wrestling, they're in their sectionals right now. They're going to move 10 on to the state tournament, and that's a big number if you know anything about wrestling. Daniel Bland is one that will be wrestling for his 3rd consecutive state championship in the heavyweight division. So we'll continue to pass along any information on our social media outlets as those come through. Our BRHS soccer team is at the Southern Shootout. They won that last year on the boys' side. They're playing extremely well right now as they've won their first couple of games. And this is against top-notch competition here in the state of Alabama. They're taking on a Northview team here today first match this morning, and we'll try to get some updates with that. And that's the same Northview team that defeated Benjamin Russell in the semifinals last year up in Huntsville that we were able to go out and cover. On the girls' side, they've won one and lost one in day one, and both of those programs have been two of the best at Benjamin Russell High School, both the girls and the boys soccer programs. BRHS baseball starts on Monday. They'll have a doubleheader down in Andalusia, I believe. This is a very good senior-laden team. They've got some great pitching that I think will move on and be SEC, if not slightly below that talent whenever you're pitching out there. And when you've got that type of talent pitching the baseball for you in high school baseball, you're going to be in pretty good shape if you can get any kind of bats going this year. And so Richie Brooks, who's been here 24 years, does a tremendous job with that. The boys and the girls basketball teams lose out in the area tournament, so their seasons are over. So, Luke, we're right in the thick of things. When you get in spring sports and you're about to start seeing a lot more updates coming throughout. But right here in the end of winter sports, you and I here in 2 or 3 weeks will be over at the BJCC with AHSA Radio Network to cover what is a marathon in basketball, and I think it looks like you'll be there. I got a baby coming, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be there. So Luke may be there 5 or 6 of these days, and it's going to be a lot of fun, though.
I look forward to it. Well, I'm making up for last year. I did get to go to the state championships last year and call out of those, but I didn't get to go to either one of the All-Star games last year, which disappointed me. And so I get to go. I drove down to Hattiesburg already for the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star football game. And I'll get to drive over to Mississippi. I suppose I don't know the location for the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star
basketball. It was
basketball.
at Jackson.
I assume it'll be in Jackson again.
Yeah, and you and I were there, and we'll see, and we'll try to update there. Some of the talent that we'll see over at the basketball. We've got some really good talent here in state this year.
We do, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see how they match up with Mississippi because we don't get to hear enough about Mississippi. You really don't get to hear enough about the talent in the state of Alabama, although it is beginning to catch up. You know, one thing that's funny, I thought about this the other day when Alabama was playing, that we kept saying, well, if the AHSA keeps taking off the way it is, then Alabama and Auburn will have to benefit from that. And I think it's really been the other way around. I think because Alabama and Auburn have become more interesting, there are more people asking me about the AHSA finals now than ever have before. So I think that Alabama and Auburn have to be good first to make high school even more interesting and cling on to that, and then it can feed off one another.
When we come back from this segment, I want you to run down some of the top talent we'll see in the state championship round at the BJCC, Austin Wiley being one, Petty being one. Who are some others that we can talk about here in the next few weeks? 256-234-6221, more of the Sports Blitz Saturday Sports Countdown right after this.
Y'all are clear.
Is brought to you by Satterfield on Highway 280 in Alec City. Satterfield is the Lake Martin area's big green egg and accessories headquarters.
5 seconds. Y'all are live.
Welcome back into the Sports Blitz Saturday Sports Countdown, 256-234-6221. Come on out to JR Sports Bar and Grill and have a great lunch. Can't ask for better corporate partners. If you're looking for delivery or catering services, call their number, 256-329-2328. Luke, back to you. We're talking AHSA. We'll have the finals, which is what it's called now. It was the Final 48. Now it's become, I guess, so many teams and so many games that we're changing that up a bit. 6 days that will start on Monday through Saturday. I believe it's the last week of February leading into March. Talk about some of the key names that we'll see, because you think back over the year, some of the best players we're seeing in the NBA right now have gone through this event.
I mean, I keep talking about DeMarcus Cousins, who arguably is the most dominating force. I think Stephen Curry is the best player, and LeBron James is the biggest name, but DeMarcus Cousins is unstoppable. And when he wants 20 points and 20 rebounds, he goes and gets it. It's just about getting the attitude right, which is something we saw. It's hard to believe that we saw a game where DeMarcus Cousins had the first 2 points of the game, didn't score again in the semifinals, and his team ended up going out. LaFleur ended up going out. It was an amazing turn of events. Calling that game is something I will never forget. But this particular season, the state of Alabama isn't quite as loaded as you'd like for it to be. There's some guys that are good, but you look at Josh Langford, a 5-star, and he signs with Michigan State. And I think one of the reasons he signs with Michigan State is because they've been on him. Basketball recruiting is about relationships, just like football recruiting, but football seems to have more flips. You know, basketball, you want to be there, and the player wants to believe in the coach because they only have to be there 1 year.
Yep.
So they want to get what they can out of that year. And Josh Langford had a great rapport with the Michigan State coaching staff. And look, it's hard to not want to go play for Tom Izzo, right? I mean, Alabama and Auburn, we might like the guys we have in charge right now, but they're not Tom Izzo. I mean, they're not even close to Tom Izzo.
Yeah,
so,
you could feel this one last year, too, when Langford was there at the finals and Izzo was sitting across from us in the stands there to watch him. You knew if he made his time at this point in time throughout the year, because Michigan State was still in it, had a good team, but he makes a decision to come down to Alabama to stay after Langford, and he ends up getting his man.
And then the second-ranked player in the state is Reginald Todd, who's – I mean, he's good, but he's signed with Jacksonville State. After Josh Langford, there's some gray area. I mean, you've got a bunch of guys who were pretty good, but they're probably South Alabama types. Now, there is a kid down in Fairhope that my friend Jimmy Stein, that does the podcast at Talking Tuscaloosa with me, has been raving about. And said, look, all he did the other night was score 45 points and have 19 rebounds and 10 assists or something against Spanish Fort. And 2 nights before that, he had 39 points and something, all in regulation. And I think his name is Tevin White, but I hadn't heard much about him. That's the other thing that I think, even though I'm a big basketball fan, love basketball in the state of Alabama, and, of course, everybody's going to know John Petty coming up. You've got some other kids that are very younger. But we don't have the quantity of big-time players. And the coaches don't do a fantastic job of getting their names out there either, it sure sounds like, because I look at a couple other names on this list. John Petway, he signed with South Alabama, and this particular ranking has him as third best player in the state. And then Kevin Morris, a guy who's I've heard about through the AAU circuit, but he's going to South Alabama, and you don't hear about the state of Alabama players. We have to do better as a state getting our players' names out there.
256-234-6221. Next couple of weeks, we'll be over in Birmingham to call this at the BJCC, so stay tuned in, and we'll pass along information towards that. Closing out this segment, Luke, let's just briefly jump into the Super Bowl, and we'll stay in it as we start the next segment. What you thought you'd see, I can't say that. I bet it wasn't what you thought you'd see, but it was a great defensive struggle both ways. Even the losing team had a great defensive night.
Yeah, I thought that, no, it wasn't at all what I saw. In fact, if it's going to be one of those Super Bowls when we look back and say, that was kind of a dump truck of a Super Bowl. I mean, it just wasn't a fun Super Bowl to watch, and it had all the ingredients you wanted to be a fun Super Bowl. You had the most exciting player in the game right now. You had the game's captain You had Peyton Manning probably going out, leaving Port and leaving the NFL, and it just didn't play out. Peyton Manning had a horrible game for a winning quarterback. Who had a worse quarterback performance for a winning Super Bowl team? I mean, would you go back to, was it Trent Dilfer for the Baltimore Ravens?
Are you calling this Jay Barker-esque in 92?
It was very Jay Barker. Very Jay Barker. That's a good call. And then Cam just never could get it together. I mean, he had a couple of nice throws, and I've heard a lot of people make excuses that the receiver did this and dropped that, and if the play hadn't been overturned. In the end, he just didn't play well. And it's okay that he didn't play well. I think he'll be back. That's the other thing. The other thing that's a shame about this Super Bowl is Cam Newton was the story after the fact, more so than Peyton Manning gets sent off very nicely and his regime is over, or that the Broncos just win. And, the Broncos are slowly creeping up as one of the best franchise in NFL history. I mean, they're getting there. They've got a lot of Super Bowls now under their belt. And the whole story was Cam for all the wrong reasons. And it was funny, it was overblown, the reaction to the way Cam acted, I thought. Then the defense of Cam was overblown. And then the defense of the reaction to the defense of Cam was overblown. It just kept rolling and mounting on top of one another. And that's just how polarizing he is.
Before we get started with that, though, and I want to make another comparison to that Alabama team that won with those two bookends with John Copeland and Eric Curry. That's how this game played out.
Exactly.
They could not block DeMarcus Ware, could not block Von Miller. And this is a great storyline, again, for the state of Alabama. Auburn High School product DeMarcus Ware, who I think is I don't think he's on the edge. I do believe he's a Hall of Famer. But if anything, I think this Super Bowl solidified his quest for making it to the Hall of Fame, picking up this Super Bowl championship. But, again, it was much like that game. You couldn't block these two ends, and you felt it closing out the game that even when you watch Carolina go back out on the field, they're not going to move the football. You knew it was coming. Didn't you have that feeling too, Luke?
Yeah, and the other thing that's not getting enough play to me is the fact that I know it was 4th and 24. I know they were on their own 5 or 6 yard line. But it's 4th down in the Super Bowl with 2 minutes left and you're down 14 and you have 2 timeouts left. You're going to punt? I mean, what signal is that sending out? I mean,
same field that we had even when they got the ball there to close the football game out. They can't block them. There's no part of me that felt like if Cam Newton's got to go back here in the pocket and make a play. And I thought that's maybe where Carolina lost it there at the get-go. And Mike Shula, you can bring in Auburn and Alabama there, but not running Cam or not doing some type of read there at the first part of the football game, a little bit of a head scratcher because I thought that's what they would have done.
Well, and here's the other thing. It just goes to show you about the one thing leading to another and it all getting overblown. But okay, so Cam didn't jump on the fumble, and that he should have. But I get it. He didn't want to get hurt. But by that same token, he runs all the time. He runs into people all the time. So you're telling me that one time he was worried about getting hurt? I mean, it's in the end, Denver was a better team. I mean, I think Carolina was somewhat smoke and mirrors because they play in a bad division. And that's, look, Denver just was the better team at least that day.
We'll talk Cam when we come back. We'll talk the press conference. We'll take your phone calls, 256-234-6221. More of the Sports Blitz Saturday Sports Countdown right after this.
Clear.
Welcome back into the Sports Blitz Saturday Sports Countdown. I'm Randy Lee alongside Luke Robinson, 256-234-6221. Give us a phone call. Talking Super Bowl, and we'll close out Super Bowl with this segment. As Luke and I haven't been on air with one another, so try to get your feel for it. Luke, I'll let you start. There's been a national backlash towards Cam's antics after the Super Bowl and the press conference that was. First off, we'll start with a positive. I thought that he handled himself extremely well going across the field, and a big smile on his face, and really not a sore loser at all, going over and talking to Peyton Manning, who obviously they've got some chemistry and they've got some background there, and you can kind of feel that when you're seeing the two of them converse. But moving into the press conference, I'll let you start.
Well, first of all, I thought Cam missed a golden opportunity. Okay, if he goes to that press conference and he puts on the same smile and the same charm that he puts on when he's winning, and just says, "Look, Denver beat us. I don't like it. It's a hard moment for me right now. But congratulations to Peyton. Congratulations to the Denver Broncos. They beat us straight up, and we're going to be back." And just let it be from that. And then some people will ask some jerky questions because the media is going to try and pull his strings.
Yeah.
Don't let it happen. And instead, he let all that get to him. And it's amazing because he's handled so many other things pretty well, considering the scrutiny he's been under, that this got him. And I understand it was a Super Bowl loss, but he's the face. He was gunning to be the face of the NFL, and he probably still will be. But you just got to handle it better. And in the end, he did, and he shows up, and he's got the hoodie on, and it's almost body language like, I'm hiding from this. And I thought that he just handled it about as badly as he could, and he missed an opportunity. And the thing about Cam Newton is he had missed a lot of opportunities.
True.
Since the stuff at Florida, he has not missed a lot of opportunities to do something really well. And he missed it, and that's okay. I mean, I think he can overcome it. That's the thing. It's like I go back to, there was backlash, and then backlash on the backlash, and then backlash of the backlash of the backlash, and it's just kind of mounted on itself, and it doesn't make a lot of sense because in the end, that's not really the story. The story is the Super Bowl.
And let me say this. I'm a huge Cam fan, so let me preface all this. I mean, my kid's got a number 1 jersey on. I got Cam Newton posters signage in my offices. So I'm a huge Cam fan, along with most Auburn fans. But my wife and I are sitting there on the couch at the end of this, and she's looking over there at me, and she's going, "This isn't good."
Yeah.
I mean, come on, man. And it was body language coming in. And look, none of us can put ourselves in his shoes, and I'm fine. Anybody wants to call in and argue with me, I'm fine with that. But he is, and don't bring up Marshawn Lynch, please. He always handles the media that way.
Right.
I love beast mode. Don't get me wrong, but that's his demeanor. Cam Newton is the poster child. He's the one that you want out in front of ads now, and you do when you're that guy. You've got to kind of know. You've got to know the surrounding. It's like sitting in a business meeting and not knowing who all sitting in the room and saying something off the cusp. That's kind of the feel that I had from this, and hopefully you'll learn something from it because I'm still a fan. I still think that he's a top 5 quarterback in the league. I think he'll get over the hump, and I think he'll end up winning hopefully multiple championships and a Hall of Famer and one of the best that ever goes down. So this is a learning experience, and I'm not completely against him at this point, not at all. But
Cam Newton and Marshawn Lynch really aren't even in the same universe.
No.
I mean, you know how hard it is for a running back to get the same kind of love Cam Newton gets? That's another thing. The outcry from Cam Newton fans saying he does nothing but get beat up. I've seen nothing but love coming for him until this moment. Now, you can say, well, people were waiting on a reason to pounce. But they're waiting on a reason to pounce on anybody. Tom Brady got eaten up pretty good too. I mean, there was some staunch defense of him from the Boston media market, but a lot of people ate Tom Brady's lunch about all of this stuff that he had been involved with, the Spygate stuff, the deflation stuff, the text back and forth.
If you don't believe there's hatred with Tom Brady, just pull back the beginning of the Super Bowl and watch when Tom Brady's name's announced. And listen to the Denver fans. I mean, anybody wants to say, look, we all dislike the opposing – Alabama fans dislike Cam, of course, because we're rivals and we kind of go against one another. It doesn't mean you dislike him as a person. I'm just saying that's just the whole grand scheme of things. And Tom Brady, he's as disliked as anybody out there, probably more than anybody because he's won more than anybody.
Let me say this, Randy. If Cam Newton walked through the door here at JR Sports Bar and Grill, I want to get my picture made with him. I'd get my picture made with him with this Alabama long sleeve T-shirt I have, because it's still somebody that's pretty famous and it's pretty cool just to get to next to know him and say that, hey, I met him. Yeah, and there'll be a million people that make laptop jokes and say, I can't believe you did that and blah, blah, blah. And in the end, I'll be like, you would have done the same thing because it's pretty cool. But yeah, and I would rather he not be the one that's succeeding so much. But I get it because he's awesome. I mean, what do you want me to do? Say he's not a good quarterback? He's a fantastic quarterback. He's a fantastic athlete, and he's incredibly marketable. The only thing that can make Cam Newton or defeat Cam Newton is Cam Newton. And the thing that will defeat him is if he has more press conferences like that. Now, this one won't kill him.
No.
It won't kill him at all. But if he keeps doing that, and that's the reputation he gets, then, yeah, it could end up hurting him somewhat. But as long as you're winning, and as long as you're throwing the ball 70 yards down the field, and as long as your receivers are guys like Ted Ginn, then, yeah, you're going to be okay. And if he also has a defense that backs him up. I keep hearing about Cam Newton had no help. He had maybe the best defense in the league behind Denver. Okay, the two best defenses in an offense-driven sport, as everybody keeps telling me, the best defense in college football won the national championship. The best defense in pro football beat the second best defense in pro football for the Super Bowl. So Cam Newton had some help, okay? And the thing about it is he might not get a superstar receiver next year through the draft or anything either because they're going to be late in the draft. So he might just have the same group of players. But you know what? I'd feel pretty good in this division that Carolina could be back in the Super Bowl next year.
256-234-6221. Got comments on that. Love to hear from you. Peyton Manning retires, Luke. 2 or 3 days afterwards, a story comes out on Peyton that has been in the works for 20 years? He's my age, so
yeah.
Or he's a year older than I am. So Peyton, this has been going on, 18 to 20 years. And should it have been brought out when it went through? And this is the scandal that went on at Tennessee. And maybe you've read the article, but USA Today miraculously decides that this is the time to bring it out, and also miraculously decides that in about paragraph 3, we're going to make this somehow into a race issue with Cam and Peyton, which it literally has zero to do with race, but that's just the way that they're spinning this one.
But if you want equality, why would you even bring up the fact there was race involved at all?
Has nothing to do with it.
I mean, that's the whole thing. I mean, if it seems to me a lot of times in the media, they go out of their way to tell you somebody was white or somebody was black to make it a racial thing, where if you just leave that part out of it, you may be able to just have an unbiased opinion about it. But, yeah, I mean, Peyton, okay, so Peyton wasn't a saint. I'm with you. What am I supposed to applaud the way Cam Newton acted after the Super Bowl now? Because Peyton Manning did something 25 years ago? I mean, I just don't get the parallel.
I don't either. I mean, if you want to make the comparison with Jameis Winston and Peyton and how the media took one story and then did not take Peyton and run with it, man, I'm all over that story. But
it's 20 years ago, and we didn't have all the same media now.
It's still worth a story to say here's the differences on how these two were parlayed to us, the viewing public. But to bring Cam in, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it makes no comparison at all to me. And so that's what really got me off on that one. 256-234-6221. More of the Sports Blitz Saturday Sports Countdown right after this.
Yeah, we're clear.
Call Dark Insurance at 256-234-5026.
5 seconds. Y'all are live.
Welcome back into the Sports Blitz Saturday Sports Countdown. I'm Randy Lee alongside Luke Robinson. I want to thank all of you for tuning in on numerous different outlets out there, either Charter Channel 3, 97.5 Kowaliga Country, and all over social media. We'd love to hear from you. 256-234-6221. You got something?
Well, I was just thinking, we're on a lot of different platforms, and we're actually on a real platform too. We've got a little platform under here that we stand on. I guess, I don't know why, to make us feel taller, but yeah, if you want to see the program, there's no excuse saying I couldn't see it today. I mean, you got Periscope, and you got you can catch it on TV, you can catch it on radio.
You normally watch it online?
Yeah, I do. I do watch it online a lot of times
when you're away from home.
Yeah, and I watch it on the what's the Mixler?
Yeah,
I listen to Sports
Mixler.
Call to Mixler, and that's a great way to catch stuff. I mean, it's so easy to catch all of this now, and it's so much fun to be able to catch up with everybody and not miss a program.
Luke, short segment here, so I want to go on a short topic because I'm interested to hear what you think about it. Michigan, IMG Academy, spring break, planning on bringing their kids down here for spring practice for a week. Where do you fill in? And Jim Harbaugh, and no matter how you think about him, this guy is keeping Michigan in the news just about every week.
I mean, what's the harm? I mean, I don't – it doesn't bother me. It just doesn't. I know some people are bothered by it, and Sankey is wanting to block it and saying it's a real issue. It's really not. I mean, the SEC is here all the time. And if you ask me, if you play your cards right, you can use this as a recruiting tool for the SEC, saying it's so much fun being in the South that Michigan wants to come here for their spring break. And the problem is you're going to be playing football up there when it's snowing and the airports are shut down and you can't get your parents to the game and yada, yada, yada. You've just got to find a way to counteract what he's doing. And I think that, look, he's outside the box thinking. And if it were banned somehow, some way, because I do feel like it could be considered some kind of advantage for the players, because you're basically saying, we're going to give y'all a free spring break in Florida. Now, you're going to have to work during the spring break, meaning practice, et cetera. But I would, if I really were against it, I may spin it that way to the NCAA and say, how can they afford to take all of their resources to the IMG Academy and have their spring break there, and that not be an advantage versus, say, what's to stop Alabama from saying, we're going to go to the Bahamas and have ours?
And I try not to get into numbers because it really depends on where you're sitting. If somebody makes $10 million a year, then it's very easy for those of us that don't to say, man, that's an amazing number. But if you're in that little fraternity, maybe it's not that big a deal. So I try not to get into this. But when I look and I see the number, I don't know if you saw with the jet cost for Michigan over the last 10 days.
What?
Almost $140,000 that Jim Harbaugh has spent on private jets to run around. That one took me back a little bit, to be honest. I mean, would it?
Well,
not
it does. It does, and it also takes away all these sanctimonious. Well, they're student athletes, and that's why we don't need to pay them crap. It comes to a close because you're saying, okay, but we can spend all we want to spend, do it all we got to. But you guys got to do this, and I'm pro keeping all of that pushed down a little bit. I mean, I don't want the players to start getting paid too much because then they end up with all the power. And if the players end up getting all the power, the sport's going to suffer. I believe that. I believe you've got to have some control over this thing. But at the same time, if you're going to have a jet that you're spending $14,000 a day, essentially.
That's what it was.
Then it's hard to argue that you shouldn't pay them more. I mean, they keep defeating their own argument. And I know that it's not the NCAA defeating their own argument. It's coaches that are smart and they're all about, let's get the recruits and I'll coach them up, like Saban, like Harbaugh, that are pushing the envelope and saying, you didn't say we couldn't do this. I mean, I get it. And as an Alabama fan, I guess it works in my favor right now. But I could see long-term where this would be a bad thing.
I agree. And, I was the main one when Michigan came over to Prattville and held a camp, and they end up getting a couple of kids from Prattville, I believe, this year, at least one running back. And I thought it was 2, and they're heading up to Michigan to play. I'm all for that because those 2 were they offered by Auburn or Alabama?
Nope.
Okay, great for the state, man.
I'm with you.
If you and I are sitting up here and we're high school football fans, we want our kids to go play on as big an arena as they choose. It's the reason that we won't go into UAB again. But that was the main reason that I was upset that UAB was losing their program, because we've had a lot of kids here locally have the opportunity to go over there and play that maybe wouldn't if they lose those scholarship opportunities here in the state of Alabama. So I was all for that. The spring break thing's a little bit – it's a little eerie to me.
It seems much on the dark end of the gray area.
I agree.
Okay, there's this gray area, and like you can get to a certain point. It's a lot like – Mississippi recruiting. Okay. Nobody seems to have any tangible proof that anything's happening, but it's weird. And you feel like you're venturing into the deeper part of the gray area. And we can talk about Mississippi recruiting too.
Go ahead and talk about it.
Because their recruiting coordinator, or I don't even know if that's what you call them anymore. They don't really have recruiting coordinators, quote unquote, but he stepped down, and Ole Miss says it has nothing to do with this investigation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess it's just the world's biggest coincidence. And then Texas has fired a guy that was at Ole Miss that apparently was at the heart of some of these issues, and saying that there were some egregious issues.
Give a few for those of us that haven't read up on it enough, and I'm being one of them. Give a couple of examples of what's going on with Ole Miss in recruiting.
I'm kind of waiting it out myself too. I don't want to pretend like I know all of this when I don't. But what I've learned on a situation like this, what immediately happened was Ole Miss is being investigated. And then Ole Miss fired right back. Ole Miss faithful, Ole Miss the school, Ole Miss all of it, fired back with, well, a lot of this happened. Not number one, it's not even football. And number 2 is Houston Nut stuff. Well, it's come to light that a lot of this seems to have happened under Hugh Freeze, which is what we all suspected. So my stance on it right now is, let's all take a step back and let this marinate a little bit, and then we'll figure out what's going on, because there's too much false information. If you try to read about it the first moment it comes out, you're going to develop these biases that are probably bad for the story and bad for you learning more about it. So I'm kind of waiting it out, but it sounds like what we thought at the beginning, that, okay, Ole Miss has got some stuff going on that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that Laquan Treadwell from Michigan is going to come to Ole Miss. That just doesn't make sense to me. Why would he do that? At the time, Ole Miss wasn't very good. I mean, I get it. But Laquan Treadwell, if he was a 3-star, I get it. He was a 5-star, top 10 player in the country.
Laramie Tunsil
is going to bypass the Alabamas, which is on top of the world at the time, and Georgia, which is a much better program.
Robert Kimdichie,
who was looking at Clemson, who was committed to Clemson, really looking at Alabama, and he's going to bypass those 2 to go to Ole Miss. Things just don't make sense. Greg Little this year.
256-234-6221. Got comments? We'd love to hear from you. More of the Sports Blitz Saturday Sports Countdown right after this.
Y'all are clear.
Welcome back into the Sports Blitz Saturday Sports Countdown, 256-234-6221. Again, thank you for tuning in on multiple different platforms out there, and we appreciate our corporate partners here at JR Sports Bar and Grill for being a part of this program for 10 plus years now. I'd like to get your comments on a couple of different things as we bounce into the second hour. First off, you never stop your recruiting, and the state of Alabama is loaded here in 2017, aren't they?
The state has a unique season next year. I don't think there's anybody who's 5-star in the state next year, but there are a lot of 4-stars. I mean, there could be upwards of 20, which is an unbelievable number. Normally, if you go to Rivals or 24/7 and you look at their top 15 in the state, that's what they normally have, either top 10 or top 15. You'll get to number 9 and the 4-stars stop. And even at 9 is questionable. And then there's a lot of nice 3-stars. This year, ridiculous number of 4-stars. And it's going to be interesting to see the direction Alabama and Auburn take. There's some guys that the Ruggs kid out of Robert E. Lee, very good. We may see him in the finals in basketball. Very talented athlete, dynamic, 4-star kid. I think he's a take for Alabama and Auburn. Markel Benton, I think he's a take for Alabama and Auburn. Kendall Randolph, that Levi Randolph's brother, I think he'd be a take for either one of them. There's some guys that are takes, but I would say of maybe the top 10, I don't know that Alabama and Auburn would take all 10. And so somebody's going to benefit from this. And you wonder, historically it's been Ole Miss, Southern Miss, Mississippi State. What's UAB going to do? Is UAB going to be able to make some inroads there? Is South Alabama going to be able to make some inroads and convince some of these kids that are 4-star caliber, hey, stay home, stay in this state, because this could be the kind of year that defines those programs, if you ask me. Now, next year, the state's going to have some high, maybe even some 5-stars in 2018. But this year is the year that I think a UAB, a Troy, a South Alabama, if they play their cards right, they can have a feast.
Well, but here's also the part that we just talked about in the previous segment that I think Michigan and the Big Ten country is throwing a lot of their eggs in this basket, are saying, Auburn, Alabama don't want you. We'll take a high 3-star, marginal 4-star up in our neck of the woods. You would probably be, in comparison with competition, we've talked about that a lot, you probably would be a 4-star, highly recruited kid if you were playing against the competition you'd be seeing up in our country. There's another opening that you'll see for the Michigans and Ohio States and those of the world. Yeah,
I mean, it's just going to be a fun year. It always is a fun year in recruiting, but, you know, there's not you think about a Julio Jones or an Andre Smith, none of those guys in this class. But a lot of really strong players. I'll tell you who would have cleaned up back in the day in this year, and that'd be Tommy Tuberville. He would get a lot of these guys that I think Alabama will have some nationally ranked guys for sure, no doubt about it. But I think a lot of the 4-stars may even fall out of the top 200, top 250. And I think Tuberville would have gotten all those guys and developed them really, really well.
A couple of players that I've seen a whole lot, and you've seen some as well, as the 2 Spanish Fort kids and Thomas Johnston. Looks like Auburn's really high on him, and I really like this kid. He's a winner, and I think he's a tackling machine. I mean, Auburn goes out there and gets Trey Threat. The 2 of them play the identical position most of the time this year, and Thomas Johnston has double the tackles that Trey Threat does. Maybe I don't care what all of the other stuff is. I mean, Johnston's not 6 foot 205. I mean, this kid 6'2", 6'3", 215, 220. So he's a good size. So but the best player I saw on that Spanish Fort team is defensive end, and Auburn extends an offer, and Alabama, I believe, has already offered as well.
And that's the kid, I believe, whose father is Atlas Harrion, the former player for Alabama.
Yes.
And Alabama has extended him an offer, and that's one of those guys. Jimmy Stein, bring him up again, talks about him and says he's not ranked by anybody right now. He doesn't even have a star by his name on some of these services because they hadn't gotten to it.
Yeah.
I get that. I mean, I'm not going to fault them. But here's a guy that Alabama and Auburn have offered. And you can see that there's some other guys that are 4-stars that Alabama and Auburn may not offer. And my whole ranking system would be based upon, does he have a committable offer from Alabama and Auburn? If he does, and he's in that state, he's a 4-star, okay? Because the guy that I may have as a 4-star that I love on tape may not have committable offers from those 2 schools. And if he doesn't, I'm probably going to say I'm going to lean to 3-star. I mean, he may still be good enough to go play college football. And let me get back to the star rankings. I feel like I have to do this every time we do a show. Because somebody's a 3-star doesn't mean you're terrible. You know what that's essentially saying? That by the time you're a sophomore, junior is when we think you'll start. There's some things you have to develop on. But a 5-star means we think you can come in and play. We think you'll play this year. Now, you may redshirt because of depth or whatever, but we think you can play and play immediately. And a 4-star means you could play freshman year, but probably more of a sophomore super breakout kind of guy. That's all it means. A 3-star doesn't mean you're not good. It means we don't think you're going to contribute very, very early. And sometimes they do, but I think overall that they've hit that right.
You know, one topic that was brought up and mentioned quite a bit this week on Sports Call, and we'll close out this year's recruiting, but I've got to bring it back up one more time because we're talking about next year, and it looks like the state of Alabama has got a very solid linebacker class here in this state, and Alabama gets 2 of the best in the country. Mm-hmm. Auburn only gets 1 guy, period, in a need position. Couple of weeks removed from it, Luke, are you still as surprised as I am to see that Auburn only went after that one and spent so much time on Ben Davis the last several weeks? I know he played the game well, and I'm not saying don't play it with him, but I said this yesterday. It just doesn't make any sense to me. He's one of those guys that you make room for. You know what I mean? You feel like you got maybe 10% to sign him. But Lord have mercy, I'm not putting all my eggs in that basket. I'm gonna go ahead and get me a couple more linebackers that aren't the 5-star, aren't the top recruit in the country at his position, but good players because I feel like I need them. Am I overthinking that a bit from an Auburn fan?
No, I would have gone after some more linebackers. I kind of don't understand what Auburn did right there, and I know I keep seeing optimists saying, "Well, look at the depth chart. You got this guy and this guy." And I'm like, yeah. I've heard about those guys, but only through recruiting circles 2 years ago. They've done nothing at Auburn. And I haven't heard any practice reports, anything that makes me think, oh, this guy's going to break out this year. Nothing like that. So I feel like Auburn missed an opportunity. I don't understand why they didn't go more JUCO for a linebacker. Now, they are trying to get this guy in from Illinois.
Yeah, true.
And a TJ Rice, something like that.
He's a 110 tackles this past year, so he's a productive guy.
Well, which is great.
Yeah.
But number 1, he's playing in the Big Ten. Number 2, he's playing for Illinois. So I'm not trying to be a wet blanket on it. I'm just saying I think I wouldn't be quite as optimistic as if I were getting a Ben Davis. I mean, I think that in the end, Auburn's got to grassroots some of this thing. Having said that, same with Alabama. They're getting transfer from Bowling Green, potentially, that will be coming in as a wide receiver. And they missed out on some guys like an A.J. Brown that I bragged on so much, and it just didn't work out. So you got to fill the gaps where you can, and Auburn's trying to get them up a transfer linebacker.
Is it Bo Scarborough and Damian Harris, and those are the 2 guys? Anybody else really?
Well, Barry Sanders Jr. would transfer from Stanford, and he's going to go to Oklahoma State. He just announced that, but I don't know that Alabama pursued him all too much. But I think Alabama feels like they can go to war with the guys they got right now.
256-234-6221. More of the Sports Blitz Saturday Sports Countdown right after this.
By Vice Motors in Alexander City. Brian and his crew offer the latest lines of Dodge, Chrysler, Jeep, and Ram vehicles, as well as the best used inventory around. Guaranteed lowest price.
5 seconds.
Vice.
Welcome back to the Sports Blitz Saturday Sports Countdown. I'm Randy Lee alongside Luke Robinson. 256-234-6221. Make sure to come out to JR Sports Bar and Grill. Throughout the year, bring your kids out in uniform. They'll eat off the kids' menu for $3.99. That could be practice uniform, game uniform. Great place and a great family atmosphere here at JR Sports Bar and Grill. Let me throw this out there as one of the most ludicrous statements I've heard in a while, and it comes from Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards. Says higher education in the state could be compromised due to the budget crisis that's going on in the state of Louisiana, and that includes the possibility of college athletics in Louisiana being canceled. In a statewide televised address Thursday, Edwards said campuses could run out of money and be forced to shut down in April, highlighting the LSU football team as one of the potential losses for massive cuts to higher education funding. Look, I'm not trying to put football above all and make it into anything like the academic department. But anybody that has any economic sense whatsoever knows that one of the highest money drivers in the state of Louisiana and Alabama and anywhere here in the Southeast and probably throughout the country is football. So dealing with a budget crisis, taking away your biggest economic impact is about the silliest thing I've ever heard.
I agree, but I'm going to tell you, I kind of like the approach. Yeah, I mean, he's going Jim Harbaugh in the governorship. He's doing something that's kind of crazy, saying something kind of nutty, and everybody's talking about it now. So everybody knows it's an issue. And I think that you start out with something like that to just garner attention because people aren't taking this seriously. I don't think people are taking – I'm not trying to go political here, but there are a lot of budget issues both nationally and statewide here, Louisiana, Mississippi, everywhere, and that aren't getting enough attention because everybody keeps thinking, it'll get handled. And the problem is now they're getting to a point maybe in Louisiana where things aren't getting handled anymore, and it's getting scary. And I guess in theory that you could say this could affect the football program. We know there is no chance that's going to happen. But if you tell somebody, what if you don't get to see Leonard Fournette play next year? All of a sudden, everybody's ears perk up for a second. Now, they tell you how crazy you are. They tell you it's a ploy. They tell you you're just trying to get attention. Well, it worked. I mean, it's not like he said it and then nobody talked about the budget deficit anymore. I bet you some people have made some panicky calls. There's some people who don't understand that it was a ploy. Some people called and said, tell me what the deficit is, and I got $5 right here. I'm going to throw it at him.
256-234-6221. Here it is. The Democratic governor is pushing for tax increases to help make up a $940 million budget deficit by the end of June. It's not only in Alabama, folks.
Yeah.
It's going on just about everywhere. And I tell you how to get the money. Taxes. Sound makes sense.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't want any more taxes, man.
Don't get me started.
How about we just, the money that everybody has, start spending it correctly. That's all.
Yeah, well, that's the difference between the private sector and the public sector is you don't have to make a budget.
Yeah.
Don't deal with a budget. Just go tax the rest of us. Make up $940 million rather than cutting something.
Yeah.
I have
this takes us down a slippery slope.
It's a slippery slope, and it gives the answer out there that you and I will not be running for public office anytime soon with this one. 256-234.
Look, I know not everybody that watches this program is from the Alexander City area, but I've read the Outlook for the past week. I don't want to be in the public sector. Because if you do something wrong, it's going to be in the paper. Sometimes you'll do something wrong and you're not even working in the public sector and it'll be in the paper. But if you do something wrong and you're in the public sector, it's going to be in the paper.
It's definitely going to be there. Terrell Owens doesn't get into the Hall of Fame on the first ballot. Are you as appalled as I am? I get it kind of, but I mean, I'm more on Stephen A. Smith's side of this. And I'm normally on Stephen A. more than I am Skip Bayless, who just feels like he's trying to pull you in. He doesn't really have a take. It's just whatever take's going to upset Luke Robinson.
That's true.
Much like Colin Cowherd has taken over the last 6 months. I was a huge Colin Cowherd fan along with you. Yep. But don't do it. don't go ahead and take. You're so talented, you don't have to do this. Please don't say what I don't even think you're thinking.
He has turned into a troll.
Yes,
and he's turned Skip Bayless. You're absolutely right, and I loved Colin Cowherd, and I loved him when he jumped on Alabama's back or when he jumped on anybody's back. I didn't care. I liked his take. I thought he was off the beaten path, and I thought he was interesting. And I thought that even when I disagreed with him, he could back up what he was talking about. Now he just sounds stupid, and the times he's been proven wrong. For instance, the Alabama Dynasty did all this. Him and that Joe Klatt guy on his program, they just don't want to admit it. They just, well, we still think we're right. Well, you're going to be right eventually. This dynasty is going to go away eventually, but right now you're wrong. So just say you were wrong, and I think everybody can move on with it. But, yeah, you're right. Okay, going back to Terrell Owens, read off the guys who got in. Do you have the guys right there who got in?
I don't right in front of me.
Okay, Kevin Green got in. I would have.
Kevin Green is.
I'm going to ruffle some feathers. I would have put Terrell Owens in over Kevin Green.
I would 100%. Does it mean that Kevin Green doesn't deserve to get in the Hall of Fame? Yes, I think he has. I don't argue that he's waited his turn. I don't know how many years he's been on the ballot. What, 10, 12?
Yeah,
maybe. I mean, but he's got 160 sacks. He's third all-time, still leading sack getter as a linebacker. And I think that during his stretch, he was an all-pro enough that he shows that in his era, he was one of the best. But is he a first-ballot guy? No, I'm not going to argue that if he's not. Terrell Owens is 100% a first-ballot guy. And if you don't choose him to be a first-ballot guy, it is because you're doing a popularity contest.
That's right.
You are making a determination that you don't like him. That's what Stephen A. said. You cannot look at stats and not put him in on a first ballot unless you're going to throw out there that you just don't like him. You don't like his antics.
You thought he was quirky? You thought he was weird?
You're going off of what others have said. Yeah, now probably some of that's true, of course, but someone that is, second all-time in receptions, second all-time in touchdowns, fourth or fifth all-time in yardage, some obscene numbers like that, and looked it on the field. You know what I mean? I mean, he passed the eye test, played tough, blocked downfield, did everything that you ask a receiver to do. He maybe had too many antics and argued with quarterbacks and ruffled some feathers, but it never seeped out onto the field in his preparation.
I agree.
It never seeped off the field. He never was in trouble. You know, he wasn't.
He might have been in. He was controversial, but it was weird controversy.
True.
It wasn't like, Terrell Owens.
It's not
was
Johnny
found
Manziel.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't any Johnny Manziel abusive to women, or there were drugs found in his car. It wasn't anything like that. Or Michael Irvin was 10 times more controversial than Terrell Owens.
Not even close.
And I think Terrell Owens was a better receiver.
And that's not close.
And I think he's more interesting. Listen to Michael Irvin on NFL is painful to me. And I don't understand why he gets in and Terrell doesn't. But going back, I mean, look, but the Hall of Fame is always kind of weird about their stuff. They don't vote Kenny Stabler in until he's dead. You vote him in posthumously? That makes no sense to me. I mean, I felt like he was a first ballot Hall of Famer.
He was, because during his era, he was one of the best.
That's right.
And I think that's what makes a Hall of Famer. If you're a 4 or 5 time All-Pro, which means you're picked in your position during a stretch and you're on an all-decade team, you deserve to be in. 256-234-6221. More of the Sports Blitz Saturday Sports Countdown right after this.
Y'all are clear. we're live.
Welcome back into the Sports Blitz Saturday Sports Countdown. We got about 30 minutes left here on the program. Again, want to thank all of you for tuning in. A number of different ways out there. Find us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We've got plenty out there, so we'll continue to pass it along. Can't thank Lake Broadcasting enough for being a part of our program for such a long time. NFL Combine coming up. Auburn gets a big number in for them. I mean, this is a great year. And I'm interested to see a few of these guys and how they perform. But 8 Auburn players invited to the NFL Scouting Combine. Peyton Barber, Ricardo Lewis, Chris Frost, Casanova McKenzie, Jonathan Jones, Sean Coleman, Avery Young, and Duke Williams. Those 2 linemen, I think, could definitely be multi-year players in the NFL. And the other one that's kind of interesting to me is to see how Ricardo Lewis does in this combine, because he looks like he's an unbelievable athlete. I don't know about his hands, but when it comes to just combining, I'm interested to see how he performs.
You know, the combine's so weird. I'm mesmerized by it. I know a lot of people don't like it. They find it boring. I'm mesmerized by it. But, you know, in the end, as I'm watching it, I wonder, you know, what's the big deal if he can go from, you know, make a zigzag in 10 seconds? I mean, that doesn't seem like a big issue. And in like when they do linemen's 40 times, how many times does a lineman run the 40-yard dash in a game? You know, if I want to see what you can run the 10 in, or the 5 if you're a lineman. Yeah. Or for a linebacker, I want to see what you can run the 20 in, because you might have to go across the field, whatever. But the 40 doesn't really bother me. That 20 needs to be good though. You're right. Auburn and Alabama both got, I think, 9 players.
Auburn got 8. I think you got 9.
And I think that's a big number, and that makes it more fun to watch. The draft and the combines are so much more fun to watch when Alabama and Auburn are relevant. And I say it's kind of like college basketball. I'm enjoying college basketball this year because Alabama's doing some stuff that I enjoy watching. So if our teams are involved in it, it makes it more fun. We have never even brought up gymnastics until today when Auburn finally wins one, and now everybody's like, well, okay, we want to start a new streak, and y'all want to start a streak of your own. That's just how this thing works. But I'm excited about the combine, and I'm really excited about the draft. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's one of the more dramatic moments. It's the one draft that gets it right. I mean, I watched the NFL draft. I don't watch the NBA draft anymore, and it's not just because there's no Alabama people being drafted. It's because after the first 3 guys go, I know the rest of the guys don't really matter that much. It seemingly, I mean, Steph Curry is sort of the outlier, but after the first 3 guys go, I mean, one of them usually is a LeBron James type, and then there's a bunch of guys you don't really hear from.
How do you think Derrick Henry's going to do?
I think he'll do well at the combine, and I think he'll be drafted in the second round. I don't think anybody's going to want to take a chance on him in the first round unless it's the irony of all ironies, what if Carolina took a shot at him in the first round?
Well, I'd love that.
Yeah, I think that'd be interesting. It'd certainly it makes for some anxious moments on Sunday afternoons here when Carolina's playing. You'd be like, half the state would be, I hope they hand it off. The other half would be like, I hope he throws it as far as he can.
No matter what, there would be a whole lot of Carolina Panther fans here in this state. Yeah. And Derrick Henry is one. Who's a couple of other Alabama players that you expect the first couple of rounds here in this draft, and anybody you expect after the combine kind of gets their name in the hunt?
Okay, the obvious ones, Jaron Reed will be first round. Ashawn Robinson will be first round, and Reggie Ragland will be first round. Those are undeniable. Probably first 20 picks for those 3 guys. Let me tell you a guy, and I've talked to a scout for the San Francisco 49ers that's on the Talking Tuscaloosa program with us all the time. A guy that is just shooting up the charts is Ryan Kelly. And it's funny to me, and this is why I'm not a scout, because unfortunately my lasting memory of Ryan Kelly right now is a block he missed so badly against Ole Miss that it forced a bad throw from Jake Coker that ended up being intercepted late in the game. He missed a block on Kim Dichie, I think it was. But he had an unbelievable year, wins the Remington, and he goes – some of these NFL teams have started now looking at tape, okay? And they're saying, we might take this guy in the first round, which is pretty unheard of for a center. And we may take him. He looks incredible.
His size is very good, too.
His size is good, and he's played against some of the best. I mean, you play against those beasts that Clemson has. You play against Ole Miss's defensive line, and then you play against Alabama's defensive line every day in practice. You're a seasoned veteran, man. I mean, they feel like, okay, we kind of know what we're going to get from this guy. It's not like you're taking a guy from Rhode Island, who has not played great competition, and then you just throw him in there and see how he does. No, Ron Kelly's done it, and he may end up going higher than Derrick Henry, which is crazy to think about, but that's probably what's going to happen.
Running down these 8 for Auburn, I'm guessing Sean Coleman is the top up there. I've seen him upwards of second to first round grade with him. Avery Young, when you're looking at eye test, I don't know. I don't know the film. I haven't watched enough of the film. But those 2 guys out of the 8, Duke Williams is also on there. Where does he? I don't know. I don't know what he does.
Do you take a chance on him? It's funny. I probably would late if I were a good team that had strong leadership. If you're the Browns and you draft Duke Williams, man, you're on your own.
Now, would I draft him 5, 6, 7th round? Yeah. You ask me, is he a first 3-round guy? No. I don't think he runs well enough. Well, that's just my honest
It's opinion. Just you can't discount the fact that he kind of just quit on his team. I mean, you can't discount that. And in the NFL, you can't have him do that. So
kind of like Kareem Kenny right now for Auburn basketball.
Right. I think that I think if I'm New England, I may take a shot at it because you got Tom Brady and you've got a coach that's in charge and you've got some guys that probably aren't going to let him do that mess. But I wouldn't, even if I were Carolina, I wouldn't want him to, just because I would want to make sure my identity is firmly entrenched that, okay, Cam's going to mature as much as we think he will, that Luke Kuechly would help keep this guy in check, et cetera, et cetera. I would make sure, I mean, there are very few teams that I think can make Duke Williams do what he needs to do. And he's got all the talent in the world. It's just, can he keep it together? And that's part of being a great athlete, is keeping your mind focused.
Peyton Barber's invited to the combine, had a solid year for Auburn. I told you I didn't feel like he's hurting himself much at all coming out this year. I thought, if anything, with the 2 running backs that are coming back, saying Kerryon Johnson gets a little bit more size on him, and I think he's just a more dynamic player than Peyton Barber, just to be honest. I thought he would probably be 3rd on the depth chart at Auburn heading into next year anyway. So, if anything, what does it hurt? Come on out.
Yeah, I don't think it hurts anything. And look, he's a 3 yards in a cloud of dust guy, and maybe that's what some teams in the NFL need. Just don't lose me yardage. Get me 2 yards, get me 4 yards. And I know you're not going to break an 80-yarder, but don't lose yardage.
256-234-6221. More of the Sports Blitz Saturday Sports Countdown right after this.
Y'all are clear.
20 more minutes left on the program, Luke. NBA All-Star Weekend. Most of the talk around the NBA has either been who's going to be traded, who ends up on different teams, and how unbelievably good is the Golden State Warriors. Let's start with that. Can they get to 72-10?
Oh, I think they'll get to 74.
Do you really?
I think they'll get 74 wins. I do. They are so much fun to watch. I want them to get to 74. They're just fun to watch. We talked about it on Sports Blitz Live, I think Brett and I did, and talked about LeBron James. I mean, look, I still think he's the most imposing force. I mean, he's the biggest name. He's all this other stuff. But in the end, Steph Curry, this guy who's, I mean, he's not cut. He's tall enough, but he just makes everything seem so easy, and he doesn't have the tools. And it's just he's the one that makes the game seem so much fun. And he's just a blast to watch. It's been whenever Golden State's on, I didn't care how good they were in the past. I mean, they had named, Sleepy Floyd. They had Chris Mullin. That was pretty fun. Was it Run TM? They had Run TMC. Was that what it was?
They had Tim Hardaway.
They had Mullins and who was the other guy they had? Why can't we remember that? They had another one. But I remember Sleepy Floyd going for like 29 and a quarter, which was an NBA record. It may still be an NBA record in the playoffs. But watching this team is just a different animal. They're going to put 125 up on you. I mean, and they're not going to stop. It's just they just keep going. They remind me a little bit of the St. Louis Rams, the best show on turf years ago with Kurt Warner when they had everything running. And just when you think you're going to make a run, I remember the Rams game, the Falcons returned the opening kickoff for a touchdown. And everybody was like, oh, maybe we lose this one. The Rams returned the next kickoff back for a touchdown. And then it was just an avalanche from that point forward. That's what Golden State feels like to me.
Here's a trivia question for you. Who was the last Warrior to be named to 4 consecutive All-Star teams?
Whew. I give up.
Rick Barry. 40 years ago.
Wow.
Is the last to make in 75. They won the championship during that stretch. And so Rick Barry is the last one. I thought it would have been Chris Mullins too, but it was not. I thought Hardaway also was one that could have been in there. They're so much fun. And look, I love Charles Barkley. But one of the most asinine comments I've ever heard come out of his mouth was that he was asked about Steph Curry this week. And he said, he's okay. He's just a good shooter. That is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard come out of his mouth. Here's my point. I'm standing. You're 6'5", so you have no concept of this. So you're not overly tall, but you really have no concept of being 6 foot to 6'2" and getting your shot.
Yep.
Getting your shot is an unbelievable art.
Without being an incredible leaper.
That's right. Without being an unbelievable athlete. Getting your shot, it doesn't matter how good you can shoot if you can't get shot.
Well, and he's quick, but he's not that quick. I mean, he's not Allen Iverson with the crossover, et cetera. And he does everything pretty well. And it's not just that he's a good shooter. He brings a certain aura to his team that everybody's thinking, I can make that. It spawned this whole generation of guys who are shooting from the pig's nose. Oh my gosh, I can't remember the guy at Arkansas who was doing that. Remember he pulls up from the pig's nose. He was from the state of Alabama, and I used to actually play basketball with him all the time. He's an incredible player.
Small guy.
Yeah, small guy, and he just had range for days. But he didn't catch on as well in the NBA, but Steph Curry has made it. Riley Norris pulled up from the tip of the script A the other night in Coleman Coliseum and drained a three-pointer. And 5 years ago, you would have said, if you ever shoot that again, I'm pulling your scholarship. And now that's just what everybody does. I mean, they've just got range for days out there.
And they do, but again, back to you can have range if you can't get your shot in that league. You may be able to get your shot in high school. You may be able to get your shot in college in the right system. But in that league, you're going to be exposed. You are going to – J.J. Redick is going to be exposed. And J.J. Redick is a middle-of-the-pack player, but he's a good enough player that he's hung out in the league for 6 or 8 years, and he's a good outside shooter, but he can't get his shot enough.
That's right, and he's not even close to Steph Curry because Steph Curry can go get his shot. And Steph Curry, he just brings this whole
Call.
let's go out there and have fun attitude to the team that seems to help them a lot. It really works for them.
Let's go back to the phone lines. Caller, you're on Sports Blitz.
Alabama 4, 0 softball.
Alabama what now?
4-0 over Kentucky in softball.
Rutgers. I was going to say, I don't think they're playing Kentucky this early in the season.
Tells you how much I know.
Well, that's good that Alabama softball, they need to get off to a good start. They got a lot of big
They lost last night 8 to Florida.
to Florida last
Central
night.
Florida 8-1 last night.
Woo, that's bad.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And Auburn beat Alabama in gymnastics.
Yeah, we talked about that. Thank you, Brian.
We appreciate the phone call out there, buddy. 256-234-6421.
He's like a human ESPN scroll bar, just giving you scores.
He definitely is. Louisville story. Wanted to bring that up. Is this odd that Louisville? First off, let me say that, okay. I'm trying to.
It's hard to parse your words
I'm
here.
trying to pick my words because it is Rick Pitino, so you do have to watch what you. I heard him on a long interview on. I think it was Mad Dog Radio. And I like Rick Pitino, but anytime he gets up there and he's telling you how squeaky clean things are, I can't get the booth out of my mind. But nonetheless, Rick Pitino, a little bit upset with this, and I understand it. And that is the problem with the NCAA is the kids that weren't involved in the infractions, they're the ones that suffer the consequences for previous regimes' problems.
Right.
Now, does it have to do with the school? Does it have to do with the compliance committee within those schools making sure? Does it have to do with the coaching staff not allowing things like this to go on? Yes, of course, but it doesn't change the fact that it's tough on these kids. They're not going to be able to play in the tournament.
Yeah, and there should be more punishment for Louisville, if you ask me. There should be a real monetary thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only way to punish it. And then see, what you have to do is punish Louisville, who will then in turn punish Pitino. I mean, the problem is it feels like this – it doesn't really hurt anybody but the kids. You're right about that. But we don't know if some of these kids necessarily were the benefits of some of these allegations or not, I guess.
I don't think they were, though. I think this was a couple of years ago.
But they could have been, and we just don't know it.
That's true.
You know what? I mean, that may be some of those kids may be there because of some of these allegations that we just don't know.
Yeah. And that's worth coming out, though. But my point is, let's just take the other side and say that they weren't.
Okay.
It's tough. I mean, what is the right thing here?
Well, it's the same thing about bowl games, and it's the same thing about I mean, what do you do? I mean, you end up trying to penalize the institution, but the problem is sometimes these investigations take so long that you can't get the people who were involved because maybe those kids didn't go to that school, or maybe they have moved on to the NBA, and then what are you going to do? You're going to get the NBA to fine them for you? I mean, it's very difficult to punish the right people sometimes in these situations.
Luke, college basketball is fun this year. Who in the world is the best? There is no answer. The beauty of this one is there is zero answer to that. Who goes in this tournament? You can week in and week out say that I think that team playing as good as possible is better than anybody else, but it could change the following week in the SEC for sure. We'll close the program with that. Keep that thought. We'll close out with college basketball, give you the schedule for today. More of the Sports Blitz Saturday Sports Countdown right after this.
Y'all are clear.
Final segment here on the Sports Blitz Saturday Sports Countdown. I'm Randy Lee. Luke Robinson beside me. I want to thank all of you for tuning in. JR Sports Bar and Grill, great corporate partners for all of our Sports Blitz programming. So make sure to come out here, have a great lunch. Bring your kids out all season long. They'll eat off the kids' menu for $3.99. Luca, we're talking college basketball. You want to start with the SEC schedule today?
Yeah, let's talk about that right now. Kentucky is just hammering South Carolina 37-24. LSU is going to host Texas A&M here in just a few minutes. LSU is a 2-point favorite in that game. Arkansas will travel to Ole Miss in a game that probably doesn't amount to much. Ole Miss is 15-9. I suppose they could have an outside shot if they just went on a tear, but I don't think either one of these teams will be making a lot of noise. Alabama's at Florida, and that's going to be an interesting game. Florida, this is a team that is 16-8. Alabama is 14-9. This game probably means more to Alabama than it does Florida. Florida's played an incredible schedule. Alabama has too, but Florida has some pretty big wins on their docket, and I think that they will be comfortably in the tournament barring a collapse. But if Alabama wins this game, you can go from play-in game to number 9 seed really, really quickly. And then assuming they don't lose a home game like Auburn, like a bad Arkansas or a bad Mississippi State team, I would feel really comfortable. Self-punishment and you want to go to that game, feel free. That's going to be a tough watch.
And I think that for the first time, or it's not the first. Yeah, it could be the first time you're going to see a during the Bruce Pearl era. There'll be an issue at Auburn Arena tonight because I don't think there's going to be big fan support out. This Cream Candy news this week where he decides to put himself in the NBA draft halfway through the season. It's the oddest thing, but Auburn's a struggle, and that's one game that you can go ahead and check mark off. Auburn on the road with Simeon Bowers at the point.
No, it's at Auburn tonight.
No, I'm talking.
Oh, you're talking about
Alabama.
Gotcha.
I'm giving you that one.
I got you. Okay.
College basketball, though, in general, Kentucky's playing great right now. They're up and down. Who is one of the top? Oklahoma's been right there at the top because they've got one of the best players, if not the best player in the country. But overall, it's a
crapshoot.
It is a crapshoot.
I'm going to pull up the top 25 really quickly, and it fluctuates so much. Obviously, Kentucky is at number 22 right now, and they are just laying the wood to South Carolina, which I really did not see that coming, especially with Calipari being booted. But sounds like
South Carolina too.
Kansas, Oklahoma in Soonerland today. That's going to be a fun game.
For Luke Robinson, I'm Randy Lee saying thanks for tuning in to the Sports Blitz Saturday Sports Countdown.